Oop, a little bit of startup issues. Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. Done it again. We've made it to Friday. Let's be excited. Let's celebrate with coffee. Because coffee is good times. And that is good coffee. All right, got no admin today. We do have a special guest waiting in the wings to bring everybody up and we'll get on with our coffee date. So good morning, John. And
Hi, Cam.
Good morning.
Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
Good morning, y'all. I guess it's evening for me.
Yeah, it's evening for me as well.
Lovely, sprightly 9 a.m. Friday morning for me, so that's okay. Thank you very much for joining us. It's much appreciated. It's fantastic when people say they're willing to come on and have a chat to us about their passion and their interest in the aquarium hobby. So thank you very much for your time.
Very welcome. I'm glad to be here. Let's do this thing.
Cool. So what got you involved and interested in keeping aquariums?
I guess it was just innately in me. I grew up on a lake, and ever since then, I've been into aquariums. Yeah, so I've been doing aquariums since I was 7.
Wow.
So dang near 50 years now.
A proper lifetime of keeping aquariums.
Yeah. So I don't know any other way.
Yeah. What was the first aquarium that you kept? What was your first origin story?
One of my parents' friends gave me a 20-gallon tank. He was a fish breeder. So I had early introduction to aquariums, and he set me up with 20-gallon and incandescent light and under gravel filter and all that. And I lived on the lake, so my first tank was a biotope. So I went out to the lake and I collected the sand, stones, plants, fish, all the stuff in the lake. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
It sounds that way. At least in New Zealand, I don't think a lot of people have the ability to start like that. Keeping New Zealand natives and stuff isn't that overly common. So to have the ability to go into your backyard essentially and pull the things from the water and everything around there, that sounds a pretty fantastic way to get into keeping aquariums.
We've got sticklebacks over here, and a lot of we start off quite similar. Although when you're young, you don't know it as a biotope. It's just fish in a tank, isn't it, at that point? But what kind of fish were you pulling out your pond then, the lake?
Anything I could catch. I mean, I had some crazy fish in there. I had largemouth bass, bluegills, sunfish, minnows. Yeah. And when they got too big, they just went back in the lake.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So what was your change in your mindset or your interest to go from just sort of keeping aquariums into aquascaping? So for those that don't know, Jeff is an aquascaper. He's a competitive aquascaper. He's had a lot of pretty successful rankings and that sort of stuff. So how was that transition from just a general aquarium keeper to an aquascaper? How did that sort of happen?
Yeah. It was one of these aha moments when I've got the Takashi Amano book, Nature Aquarium World.
Mm-hmm. It seems a lot of people have that when they get that book.
Yeah, it's a powerful book.
We back?
Yep.
Yeah,
we are.
We're good.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So yes, the book, it's right there still. So I got that book maybe 13, 14 years ago. I looked at the book, I looked at my tank, and I said, well, I'm doing something wrong. So I dove in head first. Yeah, love it. And
Cool.
It turned into my real passion in the aquarium hobby. So I went from being an enthusiast to totally eat, breathe, live aquascaping. Yeah. So that's the quick version. I'm sure everyone appreciates the quick version.
When you start, sorry, Cam, when you talking about the transitional from a normal hobbyist into the competitive part, what was it you found most challenging, going from just having an aquarium in the room and enjoying it for what it is, to the hours of intensive maintenance that has to go into a high powered contest level aquarium.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I started, there wasn't anybody in the US, hardly. There was maybe a couple people that were doing the competitions, and I didn't know them. I was kind of like the one and lonely guy who really got hooked on this, and I was doing the competitions more just for fun. It never was competition. It still is not competition for me. I do it for me first and foremost. Rankings be damned, right? So I make what I want, and it was just always trying to elevate my skill levels, growing better plants, laying out driftwood and stone in a more pleasing manner, something just cool that I liked. I never worried about the competitions. I still don't.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Definitely.
So, from when you first started aquascaping to where you are now, how's your approach to everything changed? Has it been, I can do this, I want to push myself, or I need to try this? Like physically, you just have this thing. If you don't try it, you've got the scratch. If you don't do it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when I first started, I was setting up the tank, growing it in, take a photo, knock it down, do the next one, and just like a machine, just cranking through these. I've entered so many competitions that way with just one aquarium. So I have a 120 centimeter aquarium, 68 gallons. So what is that? 240 liters.
About that, yes.
So I was cranking through aquascapes like crazy. And I would get asked all the time, this is beautiful. You made a piece of art. This is masterful. How can you destroy it as soon as it gets good? I'm like, because the next one's going to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that a lot for a number of years. And I think that really honed my skills. And now I have enough techniques, skills, the eye for it, where I can put a layout together very rapidly. And I do this for demonstrations and conventions all the time now. So I can put something that's just stunning, a showstopper together in, an 8-hour day. So yeah, but it took hundreds of aquascapes to get to this point where I can now bring my vision to reality. I have that skill set.
Is there a formula that you have, a quick thought process where you look at the materials and then it just comes in, or is it something that you walk into the room knowing you're going to create and you use whatever materials there to create that shape?
Yeah, both. It depends, right? So if I'm going to do something where I have the vision, then I hunt the materials. If I'm given the materials, then I use them for the inspiration for the vision. So it just depends on the situation. Yeah. So, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, for sure. Just do it. I always say less talking, more scaping.
Yeah.
You've mentioned skill a couple of times, and I guess nobody is born with skill per se. Like it is a trained thing of training your eyes, training your brain, training your hands to what exactly it is that you're trying to get from here into whatever canvas that you're using. I think.
Well, yeah,
skill might be
so
slightly underestimated a little bit.
That's the beauty of aquascaping, is it's really easy to get into aquascaping, but it's very difficult to master. So, even to this day, I'm still challenged.
Yeah.
I think my best aquascapes are to come.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's all fun.
I think as well,
it's all fun and games.
As new materials come out, it gives, new textures, and that itself brings new challenges, new ideas, and it keeps the creativity coming.
Yeah, not so much the materials. I think these days a rock is pretty much a rock. Wood is pretty much wood. How you combine them, that composition, that story, the ambiance you're trying to convey, those I think if you're worried about the type of stone you have, the type of wood, you're still in the beginner phase. If you start talking about this is what I want my viewers to feel when they look at the tank, you're starting to enter the master stage. Yeah. Like if you look at this here behind me, this is my Awaza 90 scaper line tank. And this is set up as a joint project with them. They provided the tank and I want to do something really special, being an Awaza ambassador. And so the ambiance of this is very clear of what this is. You know, I don't know how well my camera's picking it up or if there's glare.
No, it says clear.
Right. Yeah.
Really clear.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Sweet. So, you know, it's very clear what the story is. You know, it's a coastal village, and this is a lot more literal than what I normally do. Right? Normally, I do nature aquascaping, which is stone, wood, substrates. You know, aqua soil, sand, stones, and plants, and along with the superstars, which are the fish. So that's normally what I do, and that's what I've been doing competitively. Fun moment. I actually entered this in the AGA, the Aquatic Gardeners Association contest for the Paludarium. So we'll see what the judges have to think about this, because obviously this is something very unique. You know, you don't see anything.
You don't see a lot of them.
Yeah. In the process of doing some research prior to this, obviously I stumbled across it on your YouTube channel. It absolutely blew my mind. To see someone using that sort of ornaments at all in an aquascape was pretty cool. But the end result was fantastic. But the way that you problem solved, how can I get the housing flat to make it work properly, all that kind of was just phenomenal. It led me down a bit of a rabbit hole through some of your videos, which we'll get to a little bit later on.
Awesome.
Do you think there might be a wee push or a change in the way people do scapes and add some sort of ornaments and stuff like that to it, or do you think
Yeah, you know what? That was never the goal or the purpose. Yeah. The mission for me when I set out on this journey as an Awaza ambassador was to inspire and educate while having fun.
Cool.
So, I think everyone's definition of fun and inspiration are going to be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's up to those folks. Maybe there'll be some people who are inspired to do something like this, but the real goal is just to inspire them to do something, even maybe it's a paludarium. All the materials in here, other than the buildings and the little characters, are natural materials. Even the docks are built out of wood. So I actually collected that wood from California recently. I got a YouTube video coming out. I went up into the Sierra Nevada mountains and collected wood and stone with Tom Barr, which was an exceptional trip. That was a lot of fun. So more videos coming. Yeah.
We're speaking to Tom on this Monday in a few days' time. So very much looking forward to that as well. So that'll be nice. Yeah. You mentioned early doors. You did a lot of work with your 120 centimeter aquarium.
Yep.
Is that the size that you still really prefer to look at, or do you have no kind of boundaries when it comes to big, small? Is there a preference on a size that you like to work with the most?
Yeah, if as long as it's a landscape tank where it's a rectangle, I'm okay with it. The more depth from front to back, the better. So my 120 is 45 centimeters from front to back, 45 centimeters tall. So it's good. But for instance, when I put these aquascapes together, I'm looking at doing layers. Yes. So a layer is something else going on. So you may have the front sand layers, pretty standard. So you got the sand, beachy, river type bottom, and then you may have stones or wood, and then you might have some tree elements, and then some stones behind that. So you're 4 layers, and you're trying to get as many layers as you can in a 45 centimeter tank. If you're getting 4 layers, you're doing really well. 5 layers, it's masterful. Above that, you're epic, right? So if you increase that dimension, then you can get more layers. because you just have that much more space.
Right.
For instance, I'm going to move this, hopefully it won't. So this is, let me get out of the way. So this tank right here is 60 centimeters from front to back, 40 centimeters tall and 90 centimeters long. That is an ideal tank, I think, for most hobbyists in the United States. And the reason being is hardscape materials are difficult to come by, in particular stone.
Mm-hmm.
To get big stones here in the US is a real challenge. You know, most of the stones you'll see in the store are like this. And so if you need something really big, good luck getting that. Not to mention it's going to cost you an arm and a leg when you do find it. So something like this, where it's 40 centimeters from top to bottom, you can use smaller scaled stones and they'll look bigger.
Yeah.
And then you have the front to back depth, so you can get lots of layers. And then the 90 centimeters, you can easily adequately find a good filter. Like I'm using the Waza Biomaster 600 on there, and it's a perfect size for this tank. And then just the single RGB light. So that's the Chihiro's, the RGB Vivid 2, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And it lights up the whole tank. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so because it's wider from front to back, and then 90 centimeters long here, I have 11 inches above water line. So that, you know, the water line is usually about here, and it illuminates the entire tank perfectly. So I've had the meter out and I've measured the power levels to make sure that the substrate plants are getting adequate light for photosynthesis, and it works out great. So not only did I look at what I wanted for scaping, also looked at the equipment. The other reason I picked 90 centimeters, because you're like, why didn't you go 120 or more? Every single aquascape I made, I analyzed, and every single one of them I could crop and it would be a stronger aquascape. And almost always the crop took off about a foot.
Yeah. So taking away that fluff.
Yeah. So I think for most aquascapers, this makes a lot of sense. And then I didn't know this tank was going to be made. And it's actually named after me. It's sold by Aqualife, and it's called the Miotke tank. So, yeah, so you've arrived, I guess, when you have a tank named after you. And then they gifted this one to me. Right now it's actually set up for convention. So it will be at Aquashella in Daytona, and this is a little sneak preview for your viewers. You can see I've gone crazy. This is not even close to done, by the way. This is just soaking and getting the fungus growing out and the tannins out of the wood. I collected all this wood, by the way, also from California with Tom Barr. And this is going to stand 6'5" when it's done. So there's branches that go on top of the tree coming up.
Oh yeah,
it's going to stand. It's going to stand 6'5" on the convention floor. You know, so stand tank, and then it'll be taller than most people walking by.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that your light then was 11 inches above the waterline. Is there a sort of a magic number for lighting heights to stuff, or is that just what water volume you've got to that light is the right distance?
Yeah, exactly. So I use the meter to set the light.
Yeah.
And then also I looked at the spread. So to make sure I got the corners in sufficient light. So I kept raising the light, increasing the intensity of the light because it's controllable until I got it dialed in. Because I don't run that at 100%. So I could raise it even higher up, but then I would have light spill into the room. So I've raised it up to the point where it has no light spill into the room, but illuminates the bottom of the tank perfectly.
Cool.
Yep.
Sounds like an absolute science to get exactly where you want it to be to get what you want from it. Yeah.
I do have an unfair advantage because I was an environmental engineer at one point in my life.
Well, that's going to help.
Yeah. So.
Cool. Can you share some of your favorite projects that you've worked on over the years?
Yeah, sure. I got to tell you, so this paludarium tank is my absolute favorite tank. And I know it's most people, it's not going to be their cup of tea, and I don't care. I just love it. It's just fun. So I'm really enjoying this one. This has been set up now. In 2 more weeks, this will be 1 year old.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyone who has longevity questions for something like this has been my lowest maintenance tank and my most fun. So I might convert everything to paludarium. We'll see.
But for those of you that follow the fish room on Facebook, yesterday prior to this coffee date, I shared the video that you did with the build of that because
cool.
I found it very jaw dropping. So if you want to find that, it's a pretty much a quick click on the fish room Facebook page. It's well and truly worth watching. It is a phenomenal video. It's
thank you. Yeah,
it's brilliant. Again, jaw dropping. It's great.
Thanks. That was 8 months of effort to put that video together.
For a 15-minute video or something similar.
Yeah, 22 minutes. And everyone who reviewed it for me, they were saying it's too long. I was like, I've got so much. It took 8 months. I have like hundreds of hours of footage slammed down to 22 minutes. And then I spin quite the tale around it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time.
Oh,
very
awesome.
much just sipping on my coffee going, wow, this is phenomenal. This is amazing. So yeah, I didn't think it was too long whatsoever.
And that was version 2. I wrapped that up in June, I think. I released that in June. That was version 2. And what you're seeing behind me has not been revealed yet. That's version 3. So I've got another video coming out going from version 2 to version 3. The difference is pretty dramatic. All these docks with the wood and stuff weren't in the version 2. So right now you can see I've actually got it decked out for Halloween. I don't know if you can make out the little stuff.
Not quite.
Yeah. I've got all sorts of little crazy things here. So I'll grab a couple things. So, for instance, let's see if the camera can pick this up.
Oh, the pumpkin.
Yeah, cool.
These are puka seeds. These are real.
Wow, cool.
Oh, wow.
This is a natural product. This is dried. You'll often see it like in potpourri.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my pumpkins in there. You can see they're in there all over the place, all that orange. I absolutely love them.
That's pretty cool.
My wife found those, so she gets all the credit. And then I've painted up a bunch more of this stuff for Halloween.
Nice.
So, it just, again, it's fun. And I figure I can change up the decor based on the season.
Mm-hmm.
So
sure,
I'm going to have the autumn leaves, the fall leaves, and Christmas decor, holiday decor. And I don't know, maybe we'll put some Easter eggs in there or something. I don't know. We'll see.
It could be an entire seasonal journey for the people that are in your aquascape, their entire life.
That's exactly what I'm doing. So I've written up stories to go along with the seasonal changes, just like I told a story on the making of it. So and then I'll get one step further. And I know it's totally geeky, but I don't care.
No, it's fun.
It's all fun.
It's fun, yeah, definitely. Go with it, because if you can't have fun, then what's the point?
Yeah. That's what I say exactly. Yeah. What are we doing if it's not fun?
It's still a hobby at the end of the day.
Yeah, and just because others aren't doing it doesn't mean you can't. And if it's in your house and you're enjoying it, then that's ticked all the boxes that it needs to really tick.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Jeff, this is my idea of adding a bit of fun. I've got a cat that's with a fishing rod. I don't think you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
The cat, and it sits like that with it.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah. But we've actually had a question from somebody that's watching, and it's relating to your comments on the lights. So I'll bring it up on the screen. He's just really wanting to know if you've got any advice for plants that extend above. Immersive plants like epiphytes and immersed growth, talking about leaf burning, humidity effect. So I was wondering how you get around that.
Yeah, so I had that exact same issue when I first started the paludarium here. In fact, this is my first paludarium, by the way. I've never done one before. When it comes to terrestrial plants, I'm about as novice as you can get. So I've run into it. I did a couple of things. First of all, plants that really struggled, I didn't even try them. So I just pulled them. So they just weren't, they weren't right for the environment. The second thing I did is I realized that I had a vent up here in the corner that was blowing heat down in the winter. And I put a deflector, one of these little deflectors, plastic shields that distributes the, sends the heat elsewhere instead of down into my tank. As soon as I did that, it cleared it right up, and I've had no burn. Everything has been super lush. Now this has a mister in it as well. One of these little ultrasonic misters. I'll turn it on. Let's turn it on. Let's have some fun. So I have that in there as well. It comes on and off. Right now we're at nighttime. I've actually got the lights forced on. Normally we're totally dark right now. So I have everything controlled here on app.
Nice.
And it's just one of these, Wi-Fi power strips, nothing fancy. So I just turned on, let's see. How's that look?
Oh, I see it coming in. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I'm sure that helps with humidity inside the tank area. The other thing is almost everything is inside the tank as well. So I'm sure the humidity in the air above the water is higher. And then my house isn't, it's not that dry. I'd say 45% humidity, maybe at the worst. And I can give you a quick tour here. Let's see. So I have a tank over here. This is growing moss. This is the Miotke tank for the convention. I have a couple more tanks over here for playing with. And then I have the 120 over here. So this is a fairly small room, and I have a lot of aquariums in here, right? So my humidity in this room is good. So, there's ways to solve it. Misters, rain systems where you can have it rain down, the mist, fog. That I've seen a lot of folks use that. When it comes to paludariums, I'm just as new as everybody else, just getting into it. I've got 1 year of experience.
So where did you get the buildings? What gave you the idea for that style of building?
So I knew I wanted to do a village, and I've played a game called World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft has a city called Stormwind City, and it's medieval looking buildings, and they had these blue roofs. And I was like, I want to make that. I really want to make this. And so I went online, started searching, and I found these buildings from a designer. They called them the City of Firwood. City of Firwood was the design. And there were so many different types of buildings and people that matched the buildings and they call it scatter terrain. This is, these buildings were for wargaming, tabletop wargaming.
Cool.
And I had no idea anything about it. And I saw them and I was like, oh, these would be perfect, except for they're too big. So they 3D print these buildings, prints, and so the scale was too big. The smallest you could get was something called 28 millimeter. And I did engineering math again. I thought I need 15 millimeter. So I reached out to one of these Etsy shops and I said, can you print these buildings, but do it in 15 millimeter? And he's like, yeah, we'll give it a try. And
cool.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
I think the buildings are really cool. They definitely add added ambiance. So it was the story I wanted to tell. You know, I wanted to transport people to this city of Stormwind on the docks.
No, that's really, really cool. It's making me want to do something in this tank for my daughter. She likes dragons and things, and I think it's giving me that. My brain's going 100 miles an hour now. I'm thinking I'm going to start doing something with this tank. So you planted a seed, definitely, Jeff.
And I'm not the first to put stuff in the tank. I mean,
No.
Oliver Knott has probably made it the most popular. This is Yoda stuff, Star Wars,
Yeah.
dinosaurs. You know, he's done some great things. I love his work. He's such an awesome guy.
Oh yeah.
We've just had someone join the chat who runs a shop in New Zealand as well, and he's a massive fan of ornaments and decorations sort of stuff. So I'm sure he'll be very much enjoying seeing that in the background. So he's absolutely pro that. So that's cool. We've had another question. So Rochelle is asking, she has a 91 centimeter tank and she'd like to have a bank in the tank that creates height in it. She uses sand, but she finds the sand always tends to be flat after about a month. How can she have the bank and hill last a little bit longer? Yeah,
it's simply using hardscape. So I do this all the time. So some of my aquariums have had, slopes like this. And the way you do it is stone, put all your stonework in and then backfill it with the sand or soil. So I extend my stones all the way to the bottom glass. Yeah.
Do you lay it directly on the glass, or do you have a barrier between the glass and the stone?
Right on the glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll pick up a few scratches on the bottom of the glass, but I've never had any structural issues. Of course, I've never put anything over, I've never put a stone in there over 60 pounds either. So be careful if you're putting some big stones in there. Yeah. So, so I always build to the bottom glass, and that way it's structurally sound. I'll also tack the hardscape together with a little bit of glue, super glue. I use thick super glue with accelerator. It's something I've been doing for a number of years now, and it makes maintenance a lot easier because it firms up the aquascape. Yet when you're done with it, you can easily take it apart. It's not structurally glued together. So if you just give it a quick snap, wrap, it'll break it right apart. And then you can chip off the glue and use that hardscape again.
Cool. I hope that helps you, Rochelle. It's not the answer I was expecting with you going straight down to the glass. I thought you would have wanted to put barriers under that to make sure things don't break and all that sort of thing. It's a very common thought, at least over in New Zealand, that you've got to layer it so there's nothing going to break.
Egg, something like that. Yeah.
Not with these smaller stones.
Yeah.
Suppose I've done all the way up to at least 45, 50 pound stones.
Yeah.
It's never been a problem.
Yeah, so
I set them in there and 20
25
kilos.
Yeah, give or
20
take.
kilos. Yeah. So sorry, I know my freedom units. I'll try to use metric for y'all.
We at least in my mind, anytime it's in gallons and pounds, it already begins that process just from the amount of people that cross over one to another all the time anyway. So I'm sure there's plenty of people that do the same thing every time as well. Oh, excuse me. Where do you draw your inspiration from whenever you're designing and setting up? Is it just, I want to do this, or you're out in nature and you see something that looks phenomenal, or you've seen other people do something? How does that kind of process work for you?
Yes. There's your answer. Yes. Anything and everything. I do not limit my imagination. I run wild with it. I mean, you can see it gets pretty wild. What I care more about is once I have a vision, the execution. And that takes years of building up your skills and techniques, getting a mentor. Mentoring is very important. I'm a senior member of the Aquascapers Collective, is a North American based, you all have heard it.
Yeah.
So I'm a senior member. I mentor a number of people through that, and so that they don't have to go through all the pain I went through, because I was doing this before there was anything on the internet. So I had to basically figure it out all myself. But you get a mentor to help you be able to execute your vision. So elevating your skills so you can execute. That's where the magic is, right? It's just like being an artist. So let's say you're into sketching or painting. You have to build up those skills to be able to draw what you want to draw. You start with drawing shapes and shading and, your line work and all that kind of stuff. And then perspective. And it's no different than any other art. Yeah. So I don't like to pick favorites. I think favorites, if you start doing favorites, it's, like having a crutch. It's just, it also limits you. It limits your creativity. So I stay away from favorites. But yeah, I get inspired from other people, movies, games, nature itself, just wild ideas, shapes I saw, the materials sometimes. So yeah, just let it rip.
Anything that goes into your eyesight.
Yeah.
Cool. Once you've got an idea in your head, do you try and draw it on a piece of paper so you don't kind of forget the concept, or does it just stay in there until you let your hands and your eyes do the work?
Yeah, I would like to say it stays in my head, but the reality is I've thought of probably thousands at this point, thousands of things I want to do, and I've only executed hundreds. So I have not kept a list of what I want to do because it just changes. And as your journey progresses, your ideas and your visions are going to change as well. So there's no, if I came up with something 10 years ago that I wanted to do, if I could even remember what that was or had written it down, I probably still wouldn't want to execute it today, most likely. So, it's fresh. It's got to be fresh, and it's got to be, it's one of these things where the hobby is progressing, right? If we looked at aquariums 10 years ago to today, they're totally, the skill level going into putting these aquascapes together is insanely improved. There's so many good aquascapers now. It used to be, 30, 50 people. Now I would say there's hundreds, if not thousands, of good aquascapers in the world, which is fantastic because that's really been my mission: inspire, educate, and have fun, getting people into the aquascaping hobby.
Yeah.
So I'm successful.
I've got a question from one of the watchers. Would you consider aquascaping an art in of itself or an extension of fish keeping as a whole?
Yeah, I'd say both. I don't think they're exclusive. I think the fish are always the main actors, the main characters. There's superstars, right? And then the aquascaping is the ambiance, the story, the set. Without a set for your character to play in, what would Luke Skywalker be without Tatooine or Tatooine? Someone help me. In the ice planet or the battles, you got to have these sets for your main actors to act, play, behave. So yeah, they go hand in hand, but aquascaping is definitely an art. It is, it's elevating the aquarium hobby because you're bringing emotion and feeling into your aquarium beyond just having, your pet fish. So you have all of that, and then you're adding this world to it.
Yeah,
So
it's brought creativity back into fish keeping. Fish keeping was always fish keeping, but with the merge with the internet and then aquascaping combined, it's created a whole different side to aquariums. And then you divide that into the plant enthusiasts, and then you've got people who focus on the diorama style, for purely for the fun element, and then there's so many different layers to aquascaping that it just goes on and on and on. And it continues to grow. That's what I love about it.
Folks have been. Do we lose my camera? No, we're still good. So, folks have been breeding fish in their fish rooms for a long time, right?
Yeah.
I used to do it. I know lots of people do it. Once you're done breeding, you're either trying to make, better individuals or better strains and all that kind of stuff. Well, you're never showcasing those fish. They're usually in just a plain tank, and take all of that work and show it off. Get it out of the basement into the living room, right? Show it off to the world.
Yeah.
And to do that, to make those thing like a planted tank to me, and I've done pretty much every kind of aquarium you can think of. The plants to me are magical. So, and they're so in most, most fish, at least the fish in our hobby, have some type of natural environment where it's plants, substrate, wood, or stones. So without those, and laying them out in a way that they can swim around and explore and search for their food and do their mating behavior, without that, it's just kind of falls flat. It's kind of boring.
What comes first when you're setting up a new aquarium, the fish or the plants?
I would like to say the fish, but that's not true. So I stick to nanofish predominantly because of the size of my aquariums. And I don't want to blow out my scale. I've worked so hard to get the scale perspective correct. I don't want to see a big fish that's not swimming because the tank's not big enough. And that goes with, even if you do nanofish, if you get too big of a school, you have the same problem. A fish school, they follow the leader, right? So if the leader gets to the end before the guys at the back even have a chance to move, guess what? They're not going to swim very far. But if you have a small school and this guy, comes all the way across, right? They're going to do this. So there's all sorts of, things to take into consideration. And I've kept so many fish at this point, and I do have a few that I like better just because of their behaviors. They're not as shy; they're more active. They'll, whatever it is about them, I like the interaction with the fish versus them being shy and hide away or whatever.
Yeah.
I tend to, these small schools of rasboras or tetras or the pseudomugills. Those are the rainbow fish. They're fantastic. Those are some of my favorite fish I've ever kept. Was the forktail.
Beautiful fish.
Oh, and the sparring between them. It's just stuff like that. I'm looking for, I guess after almost 50 years of doing this, I just need more out of it than just a pretty fish.
It's interesting because people I talk to, like, the longer you've been in the hobby, it's less about this bright, colorful fish. It's about how they interact with your aquarium, how they interact with each other. Some of the more subtle markings, like the glow light danios with this yellow orange stripes on them, it's far more breathtaking than like just a big broad cardinal tetra, for it as an example. And the more you do it, there's more these intricate things that you look for and want to experience with the fish and plants that you're keeping.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that answers the question. That was a long answer. Sorry. I try to keep them short.
No, that's fine. It's always interesting because somebody that's not sort of big on aquarium plants and they're more of a practical kind of nitrate eliminator thing, the fish is always their focus and plants come secondary. But when somebody's into aquascaping and then creativity of the environment, the focus is always the plants and the fish complement the plants. So what you said is pretty much what I would expect to hear from somebody that's doing competitive aquascaping. So I was just curious.
Yeah, very true. John, I keep looking at you, and I keep seeing this red dot appearing on your forehead, and I'm just wondering when the sniper's going to take you out.
Really?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh dear.
You're in danger
Must
of
be a light.
the house.
The curtains are closed.
It's so
Is
funny.
it this up here? Yeah.
Yeah, right there. There you
That's
go.
actually
This
it's
is so
glare on my
funny.
bald head. Hold on.
Makeup.
While we're on the topic of fish, is there
Yeah.
like specific fish that you've narrowed yourself right down to only, or do you still explore different fish or different scapes?
No. Yeah, I still do some stuff. Like I just had pearl grammies, love pearl grammies, hadn't had them forever. I got 7 juveniles and grew them up to adults, and they were fantastic and I loved them, but they were just too big for the tank. I had to move them. They were, in the 120, having 7 pearl grammies. It's just, it's too much. Yeah. So it's just for their benefit. I sold them off and got them a new home.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've not long set up a 150 litre with a bunch of juvenile pearl grammies. Absolutely love the fish. I think they're phenomenal, beautiful fish. Well aware that the amount that I've got in there is going to have to be thinned down, if not completely removed at some point. I'm hoping that I can get away with like a male and a female, and then thinning out the rest of them. But we'll see how that goes. So for the time being, they're still small, so they're okay. So.
And I try not getting attached to my fish either, and I got attached to these pearls. I could put my hand in the tank, they would come in and just nestle in my hand and all that.
Nice.
So they were definitely pets, and I try not making them, where they're named. Pets. And I travel a lot too, so it's difficult. So they had to find a new home.
Yeah. I've had a question from the viewers. How do you incorporate flow and filtration into your aquascapes? How should that affect how we place our hardscape versus aesthetics?
Yeah, it's extremely important. Number one, I don't aquascape around equipment. And like if there's an overflow or a pipe or something, I don't try to hide it with a rock, because you know what happens? It looks like there's a piece of equipment behind there with a rock in front of it, because it never looks right. It's not part of the aquascape. So it looks like you're trying to hide it. So just own the equipment, pretend it's not there, aquascape the tank. Don't worry about the equipment. Flow is so important, especially if you're injecting CO2. So adequate flow is so important, as well as the water surface, getting ripple across the top of the water surface to increase oxygen levels. So more oxygen in the tank, healthier the tank. So I've got skimmers running on the tank, either a crystal skim from Awaza or one of the inline ones where you have it on the intake part of the canister. So I always run skimmer. I swear that is the best piece of equipment I've added in my entire aquascaping hobby. As soon as I started running skimmers, my tanks are just gorgeous. And I think it's because of the higher oxygen levels, as well as you don't have to worry about too high of CO2 as much as well, because it'll off gas a little bit of the CO2. So yes, flow is very important. I usually upsize. So like my 120, I'm running the Awaza 850, which is for 850 liter tanks, and 600 on the 90 centimeters. So I upsize one filter for flow. And I think that those are perfect matches. So like here, the Awaza Scaper Line 90, I'm running the Bimaster Thermo 600. Flow is perfect in here. And this tank is, you can see it's algae free. It's gorgeous. I've only done like 5 water changes in a year on this bad boy.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then on the 120 centimeter, which is 240 liters or 247 liters, I run the Bimaster 850, and it perfect flow as well. And then also the output of the flow. I like to use lily pipes typically, but if I'm not using a lily pipe, which is, the big outlet, I'll use a jet pipe, which is a small outlet, and I'll aim it right at a piece of hardscape so that it gets turbulent flow. But you do have to be very careful. So if there's too much hardscape where the flow isn't moving the water through the tank, and you're not getting gases moved and waste taken out, power heads, wave makers, I'll add them. I'll add second filters. I've run my 120 with 2 filters before because of that reason, where I went so heavy on hardscape. Nowadays I'm smarter. I don't put that much hardscape in that I can't get it done with 1 filter. And I try to not have stuff that I got to maintain in the aquarium. So I try to keep everything outside the aquarium so that you're not maintaining it all the time. Comes back to lifestyle. How much time do you have to invest in the hobby? So I factor all of this in when I set my hardscape up. So I am thinking about flow. Absolutely.
Yep.
Flow is being thought about. Going, boy, that looks kind of cool there, but wow, it blocks off half the tank. Yeah, I don't do that anymore.
Cool. That's a fantastic answer.
It's one of the things that a lot of people, I know people that are just starting out aquascaping, they'll go head on the hardscape because that's the easy part, playing it, and that's quite a fun part. But then when it comes to maintenance day, it's an absolute nightmare to navigate around overhanging rocks and wood, and we skip maintenance because it's difficult. And there's a growing algae patch on the glass around this bit that you can't reach, and that then spreads. And so, I think thinking ahead is really important. Taking
make the aquascape bold but not complex. Like there's been a trend. I would say there's been a trend over the last 7 years or so where there's a lot of fiddly bits, a lot of tiny details and stuff. And honestly, I don't think they make or break the aquascape. It's the composition, it's the plant, it's the color palette you chose, the textures, the fish that are making or breaking the tank. All the complexity that's added, like all the little chips and stone and the sand and all that stuff, right? The little twigs, and I mean, they're nice, I guess, but it's not worth the maintenance in my opinion.
Do you think there should be an element of lifespan when judges are grading aquariums and contests now?
Well, I mean, I would be a hypocrite if I said yes, because I was flipping my tank like crazy. I think we have a long way to go. And that's one of the areas, right, is longevity. There's contests that judge the longevity and the maintenance of a tank, like Aquatic Gardeners Association, which this is entered in. Do they know that this is coming up on a year old or not? I don't know. So I did add it to the notes. Whether they get the notes or not, I don't know. So I think that should be heavily factored in. How long has it been going successfully?
Yeah.
There's so many thoughts, especially when it comes to these competitions. That it's competition for art is kind of just a weird thing. I think it needs to be taken for fun. I mean, there's a serious element. You want people to put the effort in, and there's, prize money that folks are going after, but the majority of people aren't going to end up in the prize money. So, it's one of these things where it's art. How do you judge art? And judges, who's judging the judges? How are the judges qualified, and so on, right? So it just starts unraveling really fast if you're not doing it for fun. If you're willing to put effort and you're proud of what you're displaying, that should be enough. And we have the outlets these days. We have Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, where you can share your work with your fellow hobbyists and other folks. So it's one of these things, like the competition stuff. I wouldn't say retired, but just taken a break from it, because it just doesn't make sense for me anymore. I mean, that the folks looking at my work they don't even understand what they're looking at because they haven't done it and they haven't experienced that, and they're just basing it on what they like, you know, in their overall impression, and they're trying to compare that against. It's a thankless job being a judge. I've been a judge. It's a horribly thankless job. You have to spend a lot of time. And all you do is you don't even get an attaboy half the time. So that's one thing I don't like judging at all.
No, I've judged myself, and it's time consuming. It's really quite demanding as well, because you don't want to, you want to try and give each entry the same kind of approach, and it's difficult because they're all different, and aquariums appeal to you in different ways for different reasons, and it's hard to kind of keep a level pan throughout the whole thing. So yeah, it's a minefield.
Yeah, so I'm really happy where I'm at now. So I've kind of put competition in the rearview mirror. Not to say I'm not going to compete, but like always, I do it for me. Do it for me first, and then I'm sharing it with the world. And competitions were the only way to share it in the past. You know, that's where everyone would gather to see him, and it was like a big party. And I think that that's kind of diverged. You know, its original spirit has kind of devolved into more just straight competition, and you know, people trying to get name recognition or trying to become professional aquascapers. You know, the motives are no longer purely art, right? So
it's about getting sponsorships and things now, I think, as well.
Sponsorships, yeah, exactly. So it's tough, but I think they're important. But I think a lot of smart people have to get together and figure it out to make a fair, level, fun playing field. Otherwise, I don't know where they're headed.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just sitting on something you said earlier regarding layers front to back, trying to get 3, 4, 5 layers, and then talking about filtration and flow. When you're layering, how close to the back glass are you wanting to go? Are you blocking off one section and making the flow work around it? Are you leaving a gap for the flow to get through it? How does that filtration work?
Always leaving a gap back there.
Yeah.
And then I almost always have the back line of the aquarium, the last inch or two, that last layer is predominantly plants.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So that, I'm assuming, would then add more depth with, I'm assuming, higher plants as well, and then allowing the water to continue to do its thing around.
It depends. It just depends on the aquascape. Like folks used to categorize plants as foreground, midground, background plants. I hate that. There's no reason I can't take a background plant and put it in the foreground.
Yeah.
I've done it. I did it on my last IAPLC entry. I had Nymphaea in the front. You know, so there's no reason why it's up to the artist to decide where it works in their vision. That's where the plant belongs, not because they're short, medium, or tall. So I hate foreground, midground, background. And I guess it makes logical sense for a beginner. You know, if you're giving beginning advice, don't put a big wall of tall plants right in the front of the tank because you won't be able to see into it. You know, so it makes some sense, but just labeling it that way, I think, just limits creativity. I just don't like doing it.
I mean, the same thing kind of applies with stones. If you put initially you think big stones go to the back, but if you're wanting to create like a pathway, you're going to want to put the big stones at the front and create the smaller ones to make it look like you're looking down that road or down that river.
That is a very common way for a beginner aquascaper to look at it. Really what you're doing is you're practicing perspective, either 1 or 2 point perspective usually. And anyone who's drawn perspective lines gets it. So if you're on a railroad track, those railroad tracks close to you are wide, and then they narrow off to nothing towards the vanishing point, right? So you're doing the same thing with your hardscape. So bigger and smaller, yes, you need a variety to show that there's difference. Like a big stone's not big if it's next to another big stone and another big stone. You got to have some little and medium in there so you can understand it's a big stone. That's scale. Perspective is the railroad tracks, and you put those two together to come up with your vision. So without getting further into the weeds on that, that's really what you're looking at. So you're looking at those perspective lines, you're setting your vanishing point, and you're drawing in your perspective lines. There's folks that'll actually draw them right in. I used to do it in the past. Well, I'll draw right on the tank. I'll take one of those glass, window markers and draw perspective lines, set my, here's my vanishing point, and draw lines on the tank that can then be wiped off later. And then the scale, do you want, you could use a big stone in the back because you want it to look huge, and small stones up front, but you got to obey those perspective lines.
Yeah.
So somehow you have to get those lines drawn in, whether it's using other materials. So you can use stone, wood, substrate, plant lines. So you can do all this with plants as well. So you could have the plants in the upper corners coming, and trim them down to that vanishing point. So there's many ways to tackle this. So it's all basic art skills. Everything an artist does, painter, sketcher, sculptor, all of these artists and aquascapers, there's no difference. Honestly, the biggest difference that we have is aquascapers, we're working with living materials, right? Whereas it is an evolving, dynamic, living piece of art.
Absolutely.
So, right? It's not going to stay the same.
Well, that's it. And when you're creating it, you've got to think, how is it going to change? How is it going to grow in? How are we going to keep it the same, or how are we going to make adjustments to allowances for that part to grow, but keep this part the way it is and things. So it's not just drawing a picture. There's
exactly. There's no right or wrong. There's just levels of execution.
Yeah.
A beginner versus a master, how to trim the plants, knowing what plants to select, how they're going to grow, keeping them under control with your methods. Did you put them in the right spots to make your vision come to literal life, right? So it's cool. Easy to start, hard to master.
Very much so. We had another question from one of the watchers a little while ago. How do you feel about aquascaping with things like expanding foam and that sort of stuff? I'm assuming that would be to fill voids and create and mold and shape and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it has its place. Adhesives, you need adhesives in some cases. I am not afraid of using nails, screws, zip ties, foam, super glue. Not afraid to do them.
What about epoxy?
But epoxies, and you name it, I'm not afraid to use it. I've probably used it. But here's the caveat. I don't want any of it showing. I don't want any of it visible. This also goes with hardscape materials. Somebody's out in nature collecting wood with chainsaw, right? Flat edge. I'm not aquascaping with that flat edge. I don't want it visible. I will tool it, add something to it, do something to modify it, get rid of that cut edge so it looks natural, organic. I don't want this stuff visible. This tank behind me, while we have these buildings, which are clearly, all the man-made stuff is artificial, but everything else in this tank is natural. Yeah. So it's real sand, real wood, real plants, real soil, real stones. Everything is natural, and you cannot see the adhesives used, or you can't really peek behind the curtain when you look at this tank from any angle. So that, again, easy to to start, hard to master. It's really easy to glue two pieces of stone together, really hard to glue two pieces of stone together and make it look good. Yeah.
So again,
So I'm almost natural. I'm natural in the front, propped up in the back.
Again, prior to this coming up, I was doing some research and watching your YouTube channel, and I can't remember what they're called now, but the group of videos that you put together, the series that you did, beyond the photo.
Oh yes,
it's a phenomenal series. There's something very real about how you approach that, the way you discuss that, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, the entire journey through it. And part of that was when you were scaping your wood and you had your saw bench out, you were cutting them with your saber saw, then routering them out and getting it how you wanted, just like you were explaining then. And then in the end, you ended up with some plants that wouldn't grow and algae that you couldn't get rid of. And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's well worth just sitting down and watching that for an hour and a half or however long it sort of goes, because it is an incredible back view story or back view look of how aquascaping works. It's phenomenal. How did that concept and that idea come about for you to want to document that whole process?
Well, nobody had done it before, and why not give it a shot? It turned out to be a massive undertaking.
I bet.
Scaping it was a huge undertaking to begin with. And then filming it and vlogging this whole thing was way more than I had bargained for. So there hasn't been an episode or version 2 of that yet. So we'll see if I'll do another one. But I think it's one of these where there's so many aquascaping nuggets in there. How to do things. You have to pay attention, because I don't always explain what I'm doing. I show what I'm doing. You have to watch and pay attention. There's just so many nuances that are revealed in those videos.
And like I said, it was such a behind the curtain look at how it works. And if you haven't seen or unaware of it, it's well worth watching just for that. The way that it goes about it was even delivery and the shots, like the whole thing was, I spoke to John slightly earlier before this, and I said it was very much a jaw-dropping sort of a, wow, this is a great take. So I've really appreciated that, and hopefully plenty of other people can jump on that and watch it. And like I said, there's plenty of nuggets in there that is worth just taking account on. And it was phenomenal work. So thank you for bringing that to the general community. Yeah,
I really appreciate those kind words. I put obviously a lot of effort into it. I'm extremely passionate about the hobby, and it all goes back to the mission, right? Inspire, educate, and have fun. And the crazy thing is, I had no social presence at all up to about a little over 2 years ago. I didn't have any social media on my phones or anything like that. So I'm just getting started, and it's definitely been a learning experience, especially the filming and editing, because it's a one-man show. Everything you see, I've done everything. I do I'm the talent making the aquascapes. I'm doing all the speaking. I do the script writing. I'm doing the filming, the audio work, the editing, all of that stuff. It's all me. So it's been a massive undertaking, and I'm glad you liked it.
I can assure you I did not expect it to be just you doing everything. I thought you would have recorded, sent it away to someone to edit it, because brilliant. And you've said before you wanted to inspire people, and I can assure you after watching that, I was writing notes and drawing pictures, and I've got to stand, and that already began fueling my mind for something that I'd like to play with. So it definitely inspired me. So again, if anyone hasn't watched it, I seriously would suggest you to go and check it out on YouTube. It's well worth it. Sorry about my little rant there. A little bit starstruck moment.
A little bit.
Is there specific like brands of fertilizers or aquasoils, or for example, that you found are more efficient? And what's your sort of fertilizing regime, I suppose, to making sure your plants are of full health and thriving for you?
Yeah. So currently, I am a firm believer in root tabs. So I use Aquasoil. I use Aquasoil in all my tanks for my plants. That's one of those things when I started doing Aquasoil, that's when my plants started looking optimal. Because I'm not trying to grow okay or good plants. I'm trying to grow optimal plants. I want I want those things to pop. I know what they look like good, and I know what they look like optimal. So I do a combination. So I use Aquasoil, and then there's two basic types of Aquasoil. There's one with ammonia and one without, right? So you need to realize that. So I like both. They both have their purposes, and really our plants in the aquariums are going to be nitrogen limited. So the more nitrogen you can provide those plants, the better and longer they're going to be optimal. So you have to have a plan for nitrogen fertilization, whether that is where the soil is loaded with it to begin with. And then it's still going to need replenishment because it's going to consume them. I was just speaking to Tom Barr at length about this. We went on and on because I have a good grasp of how this works. And we were talking about the rice fields and stuff in the Sacramento, in the valley, the Delta there, where they inject the ammonium. I think it's ammonium hydroxide. He's going to kill me. Obviously, I wasn't paying good enough attention. But injecting the nitrogen into the rice fields, and they inject it below the soil, this solution, so that it doesn't get a lot of oxygen to it because the bacteria will eat it. So you don't want the bacteria eating it. You want your rice to eat it. So, and how they do that every year, they inject that in, get their crops growing great every year. Same thing with aquascaping. So a lot of the information from a scientific standpoint, I follow Tom Barr's methods. So I came across Tom Barr's site. Actually, I saw him on the forums. There's a forum called plantedtank.net. You're familiar with it?
Yep.
Yeah. So Tom was one of he was the most prolific author on that site. And I attached onto that, and it all made sense to me with my environmental engineering background. It all, and then I put it into practice. It worked. I'm cranking out award-winning aquascapes year after year. So I knew that this was the way I'm going to do it. So, so a lot of soil nutrients, and then I'll also dose the water column, but more sparingly, more like what ADA would do. What happens if you get too much nitrogen in the water column, you'll end up with something I coined as green rock disease. Your rocks turn green. Right. It's just that real tight. It's not green spot algae. Maybe it is green spot algae. I don't even know what type of algae it is, but it's a very, what's the word for it? It just coats the rocks. It's not like slimy or anything like that, but the rocks turn green and you can't get the stuff off. It's very hard. Right. So if you limit nitrogen in the water column, you won't get those green rocks. I don't know if you can see the rocks here, but this is a year. So these rocks have been in here a year.
Oh, wow.
So you can see they're not green, right? So this rock has been in there a year. So that is why I limit nitrogen. Oh no, what did I do? Are you still there?
Yeah. It was still going.
Okay. Yikes. So anyway, if you're interested in how I fertilize, go to the barreport.com, join that website, and look at what he's got suggested, because I pretty much follow that, except for I limit nitrogen in the water column a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that sort of following the EI method, or is that a different?
It's different. So it's like a modified EI, where EI you would be loading up the water column with nitrogen.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic for a farm tank or a tank with, say, wood only. You have algae eaters in there, and that's great because the algae eaters have a source of food. So it's a modified EI. It's making sure that the plants have excess amount of nutrients, but limiting it. So I'm putting the nitrogen in the soil.
Right. Okay. Just before you mentioned, there's aquasoils with and without ammonia. Can you, for our viewers, is there a visual difference? Is there a branding difference?
No.
Do the bags
you just
say?
have to know. And they don't even put it on the bag. You just have to know. It's kind of, I don't know why that is.
I guess you give some examples of ones that do and ones that don't?
I can tell you the Aquascaper soil does not.
Okay.
I believe Seachem, what is it called? Aquasolum?
Yep.
I don't think that will leach ammonia, or if it does, it's very little. Tropica will, ADA will, Mr. Aqua won't. Trying to think of what other ones I've used.
Yeah.
I know there's more. I can't think of them, but there's a handful for you.
We're pretty limited to the aquasoils that we can get here in New Zealand. The Seachem one is definitely here, and I believe the Tropica one is here, and the ADA is on the way. So, but we're very limited. But there'll be definitely some people that are watching that probably taking notes to see what they can play around with that as well. So
yeah, and you can actually add it. So you can use I can't remember it's ammonia sulfate. And you can put your aqua soil in a bucket and then dump in, I have to actually do the calculations because I haven't done this. Whether it's a tablespoon of the salts. So it's a salt. You can buy it. You can buy it online. You can get it pretty easily. It's a fertilizer. You put it on terrestrial plants, and you can charge the soil yourself.
Yeah.
So you can put the soil in a bucket, fill the bucket with water, so it just tops the soil. Add your solution of ammonium sulfate, and then let it charge for a week, and then drain off the water and dump the soil onto a tarp and let it dry in the sun, and then and put it back in the bucket. You don't want to leave it wet because the bacteria will eat up the ammonia you just added.
Yeah.
So you want to dry it out, and then it'll be stable. And that's basically what the manufacturers are doing.
Cool.
So you can do it yourself. So you can have both ways. Like if you wanted to keep shrimp, you probably don't want it, right? You don't want to have added ammonia. So you could buy this substrate without it and then add it if you want. And it's very inexpensive, and it only lasts so long anyway. So I think Tom was showing me, I think it was like at 12 months, it was pretty degraded, and 18 months, it was wiped out, which was really interesting because every other nutrient actually had increased from fish food, waste, all that kind of stuff because of the cation exchange and all the science that goes behind it. And the reason we use clay material for aqua soils, all the other stuff went up. Nitrogen got depleted. So that's the only one we really need to worry about. Yeah.
Tell me if I'm imagining things, but I want to say that I've watched videos or read articles about people getting nutrients in syringes and injecting it into their soil underneath it. Is that a thing? Or am I just imagining it? That is a thing?
Yeah. No, sure. You could do that. Absolutely. Whether, some of it will bind to the soil. Some the plant roots will uptake immediately, especially if you're injecting anything with ammonia, which is dangerous because it can kill fish. So if you're a beginner, don't do that. Leave that to somebody who is experimenting or whatever.
Yeah.
By the way, ammonia is the only one that'll stick to the soil. Nitrates, nitrogen. There's no other way to get nitrogen connected to the soil. It has to be ammonia. Yeah. So that's why they use it in the rice fields and that, because it'll stick to the clay particles and then be available to the plants.
Is there, you get your capsules that you can put into the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Is there capsules that have that you can just simply push them into the soil and do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sure. If you guys are enjoying this and you've got any questions for Jeff, please fire away in the comments. We'll try and get to them if we can as well.
So I have a good relationship with Tropica, and they send me plants. So I'm sponsored by them. They give me free product, no money. I like their products. This is exactly what you're talking about right here.
I've tried them. Yuri sent me some of them a while back as well. They're brilliant. Yeah, they're really good.
And there's a lot of companies that make them. Tropica's work well. I've used them for 2 years now, so I have some extensive use, and then I'll use this sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
And this here contains a full mix of nutrients, and then they have one that is nitrogen deficient.
Yeah. Do those tabs work just as efficiently in, say, something inert like a sand or a normal gravel, or are they specifically designed to work in aqua soils?
Yeah, and especially if it's just nitrate so they don't say usually how they get the nitrogen in the capsule, what form it is in.
Yeah.
I would love to know that. What form is it in? So like this one here says each of these tablets is 21% N, but we don't know what the form of N is. So if it's nitrate, it will not adhere to the soil. So, but the plants can still uptake it. So it will not recharge the soil, but the plants can get the nutrients still. They can get their nitrogen. Yeah. So if you add these and you're dosing a nitrogen-rich fertilizer to the water column, you're going to extend the life of the soil, the ammonia bound to the soil, because the plants will be demanding less from the soil, because if that's their only source, because plants can uptake through the roots as well as their leaves, their nutrients. So you can reduce the demand on the soil and extend the life of the ammonia in the soil.
Do you know, I'm assuming it's different between plant species to plant species, but do you know the ratio of uptake of fertilizers or nutrients from roots to leaves? Is there any sort of knowledge base that's been worked on that?
I have not seen that, and I know there's transporters. There's like there are enzymes and such in the plant that are transporters, and you have different types of transporters, and each plant itself will develop different transporters based on the environment, what type of nutrients, what concentration of nutrients. That's why we want to keep consistency. So if the plant is used to being in a high fertilized, high or a rich environment, right? It's going to develop those transporters. And then you say, do a water change, you flush all the nutrients out of the system, and you have no nutrients in the system. It's got to develop the low volume transporters, the low concentration transporters. I forget what the scientific name on those is. I'm an artist these days. I'm retired. I'm just an artist. So again, go to the BAR report. All this stuff is out there, and you can get the definitive, authoritative answer to all these things. But that is my understanding. So hopefully that helps.
So is that some of the reasoning why the aquarium behind you has only had 5 water changes over the last year, to not be playing around with that system too much?
Yeah, so the water quality is stable, and there's just no reason to do a water change. The clarity of the water is there. The plants are healthy. The parameters, so I measure the parameters in the water. They're healthy. They're where I want them. There's no reason to change the water.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah. if you want to grow, and these are not optimal plants, by the way, behind me.
Mhm.
These are low maintenance. I'm having fun time.
Right.
They're not for contest, right? So
Mhm.
even though they look beautiful, these plants look stunted and not optimal growth.
Right.
So if I wanted to enter one of the major international aquascaping contests, what I do is I really load up on nutrients. I have my CO2 cranked up to the maximum. I have lots of fertilizers, and I run extremely high light. And for instance, I'm getting 6 inches of rotala growth a week.
Wow.
6 inches is what, 14 centimeters
A lot.
a week.
Yeah.
So, that's for a contest tank. So I'm getting big, bushy, full plants, and I'm turning them over constantly. And the leaves look perfect. They're large, and you can just see the leaf under the microscope looks perfect. The colorations are outstanding. Dark greens, light greens, yellows, oranges, reds. All of those colors are coming out of the plants. The form looks good. The internode space between the plants leaves along the stem are tight and compact all the way from the bottom. There's no leaf drop off of the bottom of the tank. All of these things go into that process, and I'm constantly just dumping fertilizer in the tank constantly because it's getting consumed fast. So, but I would say for majority of people, 99% of people aquascaping don't do that, do this. Yeah.
So you've just taken me on an absolute journey during that, and it's brought me back to your video series, and you're talking about the precise moment in time when you take your photo that you send in for the judging in this competition or any competition. Do you just know when it's the right time to take the photo, or are you training everything to be precise so you can time everything where you need it to be and then begin that process of, in this window is photo time?
Yeah. So based on experience, I know generally where that's going to be. I'm not leaving anything to chance. It's not like, I'm on week 22, I'm going to pull the camera out and shoot a photo. That's not how it works. I pull out the camera on in fact, day 1, week 1, week 4, week 8, week 12, and I can see the progress. So it's not a surprise. It is very much, I know, okay, I need to, I'm drawing. So I'm taking my iPad here, and I'm taking my photo and I'm drawing on it, and I'm planning my changes of where I'm going to trim and all that. And I know how fast the plants are going to grow. And so it's all calculated, all planned out. So there's nothing left to chance. So when I go to shoot the final photo, the only thing that I'm not 100% sure on is where the fish are going to end up. And even that I try to control. Like, so if you scare your fish into a school, they lose their color. They'll fade because they're stressed. You have to learn, you have to train your fish and learn where they're going to be, where you want them in a photo, and train them to be in that position. Also, when the equipment comes off and we're doing like surface ripples, those are hair dryers. Fish hate hair dryers. Excuse me. I dropped something that I don't want to drop. But so I'll even take practice photos the whole way, simulating the final shoot result. So I know where the fish are going to be. Yeah. So there's so much effort that goes into one of these contests, aquascapes. Yeah.
How do you train the fish? Because that was something else that resonated with me during that video series.
For instance, if it's a school of small nanofish that are fairly outgoing, you can use your hand. So I'll actually take my hand, put it into the tank, and just kind of corral them all up to a corner, feed them, kind of just gently scoop them up, you know, doing a water change or whatever, and then sprinkle a little food, let them eat, and then I release
Just
when
like
they're
training
done
a dog.
eating. Yeah, and I release, and then they'll flow out of the corner naturally. Yeah. So, and when I say feed, I mean the teeniest tiny amount, so it's gone within moments.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just so they're
So
there.
that
They've got
they
the reward in a
associate
way.
my hand is not dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they get them comfortable with your hand, and then you could just corral them back to where you want them.
Mhm.
Take your hand off, and then I have a remote trigger on my camera, and I start snapping photos as they come back out of the corner, and they'll come out nice in a nice gentle swim, and usually the formation will be exceptional, and you get them typically where you want them because you've done this 25, 50 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
No, it doesn't work on all
phenomenal.
fish. Yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't work on all fish. So you just have to work with whatever your fish's behavior is.
Yeah.
But that hand method will work for the majority of fish. So you get a nice natural swim. It's really important too for the final photos effect so that the fish don't overlap.
Mm.
So you want them to swim out in a controlled manner, so where they're doing the follow the leader thing.
Yeah.
You'll see, typically you'll see if they're spooked, you'll see that they're more overlapped and they're real tight. So they're in this tight ball and it doesn't look good. If you look at my photos, you'll see that the fish stretch out across the entire tank.
Mhm.
And that's how I'm doing that.
Wow.
That's a trade secret there because
That
I'm
is some
taking a break.
phenomenal insight. Wow. Cool. How do you deal with algae issues? Because obviously you're setting up a new tank, you'll get like diatoms and other things. You know, the lack of the tank itself being mature to sort of counter that.
Yeah.
Is that something that again you've scientifically dialed into? You know, this to this to this to this, or do you just deal with it as it comes along and then adjust as you need to?
Yeah. So algae is always an issue. I would say 9 out of 10 of my tanks that I set up, I'm doing them heavily planted to begin with.
Mhm.
And I'm doing heavy water changes for the first 2 weeks.
Yep.
First week is every day. Second week is every other day. And then I'll start going to once a week if the tank looks good. It's just so important to control that because you're doing those out, in the beginning is you're reducing the number of algae spores in the tank when you're doing those large water changes. And I don't have fish in the tank typically when I first start out. So I can take it right down to the soil and do a 99% water change. So I'm flushing everything out of the system, putting all tap water back in and re-fertilizing the whole thing. You know, remineralize the water, re-fertilizer.
So you're fertilizing between every water change as well.
Every water change, putting the parameters back to what they were. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the EEI typically when I start up a tank like that. Yeah. And that's if you start clean, you're going to stay clean. Cool. So that's been my experience is that rarely like the IAPLC videos I put together, that wasn't even algae. I don't even know what I ran into on those. So folks that watched that, it was this like brown, creeping, dusty crud stuff that you could not even see the cell structure under 400 times magnification.
Wow.
So I don't know what it was. I bounced it off a whole bunch of my peers. Nobody knew what it was. I couldn't get it out of the tank. I had to break the tank down and bleach it, throw out all my filter media and throw out all the plants and then bleached everything. Bleached the stones, bleached the tank, bleached the equipment. And since I did that, I'd never had to come back. So it was something came in on wood or plants or, something came in and it was just death.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And it wasn't algae. I've run into just about every type of algae, and I'm a real big fan of if you own an aquarium, get a microscope. Mm-hmm. They're not expensive. You can get them $60 and you can create a quick slide and you can put that slide and you can see what type of algae you're dealing with. There's a lot of algae that are very controllable and some that just suck, and it may not even be worth, fighting the battle because you're going to lose the war.
Yeah.
I look at you, Spyro or Clado. They're awful.
We've had a question from our watchers. Silver Creek has asked hair algae, and I'm just going to assume that you're asking how do you combat hair algae would be my thought. Yeah. So how do you approach if you get a bunch of hair algae coming through?
Yeah, so I used to have issues with hair algae. Ever since I switched to tissue culture plants, I don't have that problem anymore.
Cool.
Otherwise, you're always fighting hair algae. It seems like you're combing it out, or doing the hydrogen peroxide or algicide treatments to treat it. And it's one of those where you're fighting battles and you're trying to change the conditions. And how did you get into this mess? And sometimes there was nothing you did. Like Clado or Spiral will grow under the same great water conditions that the plants grow in. So you're like farming it at that point. That's why I say you win the battle, but you'll lose the war. So to combat hair algae, I avoid it in the first place. So I stick to tissue culture plants. And since I've been doing tissue culture plants, I've not had hair algae issues.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps. They are worth it. I think they're one of the best innovations we've had in the aquarium hobby is tissue culture plants. Occasionally I'll
recently just arrived in New Zealand as well, Cam, isn't it?
Yeah, they've only been here for 4 months or so, maybe a little bit less time. So tissue culture is very, very new to New Zealand hobby. So it's exciting that we've got them, and everyone's definitely jumping on board with them, which is cool as well.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I love them, and like I said, since I started using them, hair algae is in the rearview mirror, and this has been I've been using them for I don't know 6-7 years at least.
Yeah, cool. I've been using them for probably about the same. And when you use them, the tank just starts off so much better. You just get such a better start. Albeit it takes time for everything to grow back in, but compared to established plants, but it doesn't take that long if you do it right.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
2 weeks you should have full grown plants from tissue culture. Otherwise, something's wrong with tissue culture. The biggest issue with tissue culture is if they weren't handled correctly or if they've exceeded their shelf life. There's only so much plant energy in those cups, and it's being consumed up to the point you open it and put it in the tank, and it has to have enough energy to kick off growth. And if it doesn't, it will collapse and you'll lose the cup. And I've seen that multiple times. You'll hear horror stories. The other thing that I've heard issues with tissue culture is with high ammonia levels in the water column, with some of those aqua soils that contain a lot of it up front. So something that's becoming popular right now is something called the dark start, which is it's been around forever. Basically, you're letting that ammonia leach out of the soil and doing water changes while your lights are off. So you're removing the ammonia that they added to grow your plants just because it's such a high concentration. It's great for the plants. The plants love it, but you can't control the aquarium. You end up with algae blooms, and it also will apparently burn tissue culture. Yeah. And I use the Aquascapers soil and doesn't have the ammonia, so I have not run into that recently.
I've just recently come across the dark start method. Haven't looked into it, but on one of the pages here, New Zealand based, there's a few people who have just begun talking that and beginning to play around with that. So that'll be interesting to see how they go down here.
Yeah, that method's been around for a long time. I think it's just everything in this hobby has probably been done before, and it just pops up. It seems like every 10 years or something. It's like fashion. Bell bottoms are back.
Someone's done a big deep dive and re-earthed something that was already done a while back.
I used to see a lot of people wrapping reef tanks in black bags to block out all the light for 2 weeks.
The blackouts for algae.
And it's only recently that I've started to see it appearing in like planet tanks. It's quite funny.
I think it's a bad idea for planet tanks. I mean, it can work, but
Plants
you're going to
need light.
weaken. Yeah, you're going to weaken the plants. So the
Mhm.
plants are weak already because they got the algae on them.
Yep.
And then you're going to block them out. They're going to be even weaker. They're not going to have the energy to come back. I don't like it for planet tanks.
Mhm.
You know, corals are a different beast, right? It's an animal. It's not a plant.
Yeah.
So I think they have a
Exactly.
lot more success with the blackout method.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's plenty of success stories with blackout method. And I'm sure there's plenty more stories of where it failed them.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's just like anything
Absolutely.
in this hobby.
I
Yeah,
know.
one of those. It worked for me, so it should work for you type of scenario.
Yeah. Every tank is different. Just like if I tell you how to do something, it may not work because just right from the source, my water is going to be different.
Yeah.
Unless you live in the same city.
And even then.
Yeah, even then. Yeah. You got old pipes. That's your problem.
Yeah.
What's some advice that you give someone who has decided they want to take the plunge into aquascaping? I've watched all the YouTube videos, I've read all the books, I've listened to all the podcasts. I'm doing it. I've got a blank aquarium. Now what? What's your first sort of things you think?
Fully invest. Do it if you can't afford a nice setup. On a large scale, just get a small one.
Mhm.
Even a small one is a great way to start. There's no reason, like the one behind me here on this shelf right here is a 45 centimeter. That's a great startup tank.
Absolutely.
And you can get that glass for under 100 US. I don't know what it is over where y'all at, and the lighting has come down. There's a lot of lights for these tanks now where you can get those for under 100. So get adequate lighting, a nice tank, get the aqua soil. Aqua soil will help you out tremendously. It's designed. It's an amazing product. And I know it seems pricey, but for a tank this size, you only need 3 liters of it. Don't worry about hardscape. Get some nice plants. Start with tissue culture. The filter is always nice to have a good filter on it. I've got the Waza hang on the back on this one. It's just a moss tank. I run the Biomasters. It's nice to buy once and be done. So the problem with that is, if you find it's not your passion or you don't have the time for it, then you're invested. But, start with, the proper size tank, get adequate lighting, get the aqua soil in it, make sure you have good flow, fertilize, don't overlight. Most beginners overlight. Lighting doesn't need to be that bright. You can get away with far less lighting than most fixtures have these days. So light strength is not going to be a problem. Light spectrum has been shown not to matter. So you pick the light color spectrum to what looks good to your eye. CO2 is wonderful for growing optimal plants. Some plants will, really appreciate it. Some will not have enough energy to grow without it. So make sure you pick your plants accordingly if you're going to have CO2 or not. If you're going to do CO2, I highly recommend not doing DIY CO2 unless you're doing it in a room. Unless you're doing it in a room that can be okay with a disaster. Yeah, like if you're doing a yeast method or the citric acid, one of these methods where it could pop and expel itself all over your room, smell it all up,
stinking.
So yeah.
So how many aquariums at the moment have you got running CO2?
One.
Just the one?
This is not CO2.
No, I didn't think that would be, but your competition tank, I'd imagine, will be.
This one over here will be when I set it up. So I collected all the material. My camera's flipped, so I keep pointing the wrong way. This one will be CO2. It has CO2 on it. You can actually see the bottles behind the filter.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
behind the leg. It's all aesthetic. So there's CO2 bottle on there. This one over here has CO2. So that's my one I'm running CO2 on now. So the bottle is behind the wall. So you can actually see I have wires passing through the bottom there.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see actually the CO2 tubing coming up on the side. Yeah, I have a lot of tanks. Aqualife has given me all these tanks to review, and I love them. That's their lights, by the way. I don't think you can get them there, but
No, I don't.
but anyone in the US, anyone in the US, they're fantastic tanks, and they make so many different sizes. These are Aqualife tanks, Aqualife tank,
Yeah.
Aqualife
We get
tank,
Aqualife here in the UK.
and then this is the Waza tank with the awesome cabinet.
With
So
the
this
pull-out
is
back.
this is
pull-out
kind of
back.
cool. Sorry,
Anyway.
the pull out. You're saying?
Yeah, for the filter.
I heard pillow twice.
No, sorry.
So, like here, so I have auto top off on all of my tanks, so I don't have to worry about the water level. And in this tank, it's really important because this level needs to stay here for the mister to work.
Yeah.
So super, super easy. I mean, the maintenance is basically, pull the pre-filter here, sponge it out. Yeah, done. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah.
Done for this month.
Nice. Yeah, I quite like those pre-filters on there. I think they're quite a brilliant addition to a canister, to be fair.
Yeah, they're awesome.
I think I want to say recently, but I don't know exactly when. I vaguely remember someone or a podcast I was listening to saying that if you're using aquasoil and you're not using CO2, you're kind of wasting your time, and they kind of need to work together. That's not your thoughts on that?
No,
That's fine without?
CO2 drives photosynthesis. It has nothing to do with the other nutrients. So CO2 is how plants get their carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So 40% of aquatic plants is made up of carbon. So that is how the plant is getting its carbon. So you're fertilizing carbon when you're running CO2.
You're right.
You're not fertilizing nitrogen. You're not fertilizing iron, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, potassium, all the traces. You're not adding that with CO2. That's coming from the aqua soil or the liquid
CO2,
fertilizers or root tabs that you're putting in.
The CO2 makes the plants consume more nutrients.
Yes.
Well, I think
that's because you have more photosynthesis. Yeah.
To get more, to get the plants using more of the goodness in the soil, the CO2 does that. It supercharges the plants to get more out of there. So if you're not using CO2, you're not utilizing that nutrients as much as you could be. I think that's maybe where the comes from.
Yeah, it's a triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one side weak, so if you're not providing enough carbon, the plant is not going to grow optimally. It's going to grow slow. It's not able to get carbon. It might be using enzymatic processes to break down other constituents to get their carbon atoms, right? Versus if you inject CO2, and by the way, if you don't inject CO2, you're at 3 parts per million CO2 in your water if you have good water surface agitation. So it's not like you don't have CO2.
Not as much.
You're not enriching the CO2. So you still have CO2 from the water interface, the water-air interface. There's 400 parts per million of CO2 in the air. 3 parts per million will dissolve on its own into the water column. When we inject CO2, we enrich the water with CO2, we're somewhere around 35 parts per million or even higher. That's a big difference. So your plants are going to be able to photosynthesize that much more because the CO2 is going to be available.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have to provide more of the other nutrients because every time it builds a plant cell, a stem cell, leaf cell, root cell, it needs nitrogen, it needs phosphate, it needs potassium, it needs calcium, it needs all these things. So you have to provide enough of everything. That's why CO2 works so well in the aquatic environment, because we're enriching it and we're removing that limitation of carbon. Otherwise, they're carbon limited. That's why CO2 works.
A lot of the plants are not 100% aquatic as well. I mean, a lot of them are part immersed and only get fully submerged during wet seasons and things. So these plants are used to environmental CO2. And when you put them fully underwater, they don't get that. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Almost all the plants that we have in the hobby are marginal plants.
Yes.
You know, they like wet feet. Yeah, but they grow best when they're not submerged. They like emerged. And in fact, they are always fighting. If the 120 was on, I could show you all my plants are fighting out the top. They're all growing out of the top, because then they grow the different leaves. They're growing their emergent growth, different shape, different texture. Everything changes. And then also the speed picks up, because now they're not limited by 35 parts per million. Now they have 400 parts per million CO2. So yeah, it's one of the things where you have to balance it. And that's what estimative index is providing all the nutrients that the plants need and limiting nothing. So you're providing a rich CO2 environment. You can go higher in the water if you don't have fish.
Yeah.
You could take it way up. I mean, your water's going to get really, really acidic, but you can take it way up. Yeah. There's a point of where the balance tips out and you're screwing up your bacterial colonies and all that stuff, right? We don't want battery acid in our tanks, but you can really crank up that CO2 without the fish. The fish, it's not like the CO2 is replacing O2 either. So the oxygen levels has to be high as well. But yeah, it's all balancing act. Again, easy to start. You're supposed to finish my line.
There you go. We've had another question. I think this, just looking at the time, will probably be the last one that we can get to.
All right, make it a good one.
So, carbon dioxide is provided in massive amounts with a deep dirt substrate. Is that true?
Father fish. No way. You would need so much. I think they're asking about in the decomposition into CO2 gas. You would need so much decomposition. It would be insane. It would be absolutely insane. It would be just it would be a muck in your tank. And I'm not even sure you would get just CO2 byproducts. You'd have to start worrying about other byproducts as well. I think that's a dangerous recipe, and you're going to get far more CO2 into the water column from the water air surface by providing a nice light ripple agitation than decomposition in the soil. No, that's I'm just going to say that's absurd.
That's absurd.
I think that's some bad advice. All I know is I don't rely on that for my CO2, and I just don't see any reason to. I mean, it would be uncontrolled. I mean, every way you look at it, it seems like a really, really bad idea, right? Can you imagine a bunch of beginners putting real thick soil beds in to get their CO2s up?
Well, I mean, if you think of people that do biotopes as well, they purposely put decomposing matter in the bottom, leaves, wood, cell casings and things, and it's never been an issue. If that was the case,
it's not adding.
Would be struggling.
It's not adding substantial amounts of CO2. I bet you it would be immeasurable amounts. It wouldn't. I can't see how that would drive photosynthesis, the decomposition of the, and then also the diffusion. You have to get out of the deep substrate, right? And that's like muck. It's just like thick. I don't see it happening. I just, every way I look at this, I have I'm just, this is my gut. I have no science to think of, just as an environmental engineer, as an environmental engineer and almost 50 years of experience, this sounds like hokum.
Okay, well, we can leave it with that.
Yeah, we'll end on Holcomb.
When we finish our Fanatic Friday coffee dates, we like to leave it in with a school of 6, which is 6 really quick yes/no type answers. So the first question I'd like to ask you is: are we alone in the universe?
No,
No?
absolutely
Cool.
not.
Cool. If you could have a meal with absolutely anybody, alive or dead, who would that be?
Meal, alive or dead. I would pick someone very, very long ago. I can't think of a name, but very, very long ago, just to see what it would be like back then.
Cool. Yep, compare notes,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Heads or tails if you're tossing a coin?
Heads.
Cool. Playing paper, scissors, rocks, what's your first call?
Paper.
Cool. Do you drink tea or coffee?
Neither.
Okay.
Oh,
And if you could have a unicorn fish or plant, one that you've never kept, never escaped with, never photographed, whatever it happens to be, just this one that's always eluded you, what would that be?
Man, I don't have a real one, but I would love some type of mini, like red tiger lotus plant, something that would send up teeny tiny, like the mosaic plant.
Mhm.
oh wow, yeah.
And
That'd
it
be
would send up
beautiful.
these leaves to the surface, and there'd be these geometric patterns.
Mhm.
How nuts would that be?
Yeah,
I think someone needs
that
to
would
start
be
working on that now. That would be
a mosaic petite.
nuts.
I
Yeah.
can absolutely accept that as a unicorn plant.
Yes.
Cool. So where can people find you if they're looking for more information on you
I
or
can help with
some of
that.
your escapes or anything like that?
Yeah, so I am available. Yeah, there you go. Instagram at Jeff Miotke, Miotke. Website, jeffmiotke.com. And YouTube channel is Jeff Miotke Aquascaper.
Cool. I would
And-
strongly suggest that people jump on your YouTube channel and watch that playlist because it is phenomenal. It's great. Yeah. Cool.
I appreciate the shout out. It's awesome. It was fun talking to y'all. I can talk tanks all day. Give me a cold beverage and
Away you go.
Well,
yeah.
what is your cold beverage of choice then? If you don't drink tea or coffee,
I drink
What
either
is it?
water or beer.
Very cool.
That's
that worked for me.
all I drink.
Thank you very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. It's been a fantastic chat. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and there's been some incredible information sharing that's gone on. So it's really, really appreciated. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining
Grateful
us,
to be
Jeff.
here. Less
All right.
talking, more escaping.
Yeah.
Make
Get to it,
happen.
people.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. So have a good one, team. Happy fish keeping, and catch you later. Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend, guys.